called How an Order of Swamis Got Its Name. Almost like a mythical figure riding out of the American frontier, a young scholar with transcendental credentials emerged upon India's continent and walked forth with a fresh heritage echoing ancient lore. That's a mouthful. He began roving about the countryside, exclaiming the good news of his personal discoveries. For some time now, he would cross over, pass through the empirical and rational threshold, and enter in his conscious endeavors of meditation and contemplation into what the West refers to as mystical territory. No more speculative discourses on the nature of matter, the cosmos, or the afterlife for him. Enough with the ritual imploring of the deities in faith. His proven vision of life supersedes the consoling words of scriptures. He walks the sands of time as an invincible knower of vaster realities. The other side of death was no stranger. Like a planetary astronaut, he conquers both inner and outer space. Unknown to his compatriots, this radical young adventurer now drew his inspirations as a resident of the entire universe. His name, Shankara. Could I have a drink on that one? How's that for an introduction? Now it gets interesting. His heart could not bear hoarding the galaxies of truth that he visited daily, for he woke and found himself a man with a universal mission. His solitariness embarked on a magnanimous journey to educate his beloved country women and men. Inviting one and all, he knew that they could experience the distant polar star of eternity, moksha, the final liberation, not as a pious reward condescendingly promised by pundits after death, but as a living experience in their daily lives. Shankara's unreachable dream for his patriots was nothing less than for them to taste daily their own immortality. That's a big ambition. So began the work of our shawled crusader, soon to encroach on the illusions of society's upheavals. Subversive chaos might be a better description of his bizarre times. Conflicting political and social agendas swayed the citizens to follow lifestyles that could only lead to spiritual bankruptcy. In his sojourning, he encountered fresh scholars boasting of their Brahmin lineage, dazzling audiences with long-winded quotations from the Vedas. And across the street were the Buddhist Chungpas, casting spells over anyone's selected opponents, all for a fee, of course. You're supposed to laugh. This melee of striving pundits and mullahs, academicians and shamans, all competing for the hearts and minds and pocketbooks of the town people, was common practice in those days of the 8th century. And to prove their mettle, these rogues of sophistry and black magic, along with the earnest scholars and wandering pedagogues, challenged the residing master to a public debate. The key to the city awaited the triumphant victor. See, in those days, he took on the so-called top scholar of the town. And if you could win, you had quite an array of prizes. I'll tell you about it in a minute. This was the custom way back Better than Monday Night Football, the town crier would announce the scheduled showdown in the village square. The rules of the dispute were very sacrosanct, approaching an Olympian standard for rectitude. The acknowledged referee would put forth the questions on any conceivable subject, mundane, spiritual, or otherwise, no holds barred, and each contestant would in turn reply. The quality of the answer and the depth of the retort were weighed carefully. The contest rounds might extend for days. It wasn't over until the referee declared it so, and the townspeople eagerly showed up every day. Now the stakes were quite high. Not only did one's reputation ride on the outcome, but the price of losing the contest obligated the loser to become the victor's apprentice. Winner takes all. Oh. As the years went by, Shankara's reputation grew as he debated all comers and local champions, sustaining an unblemished record. During his wanderings, he heard about a remarkable old master, Kumarilla, and his pending departure from this plane. He immediately set out down the Ganges, and one day came upon the elder who was in the process of departing his body. And in his parting words, the elder urged the young visitor to contend with his favorite prodigy, who now was his equal. Okay. Traveling further south, Shankara finally entered the village of Mandana Mishra, the undisputed teacher of this region. He was hardly in town when word spread that the gods had brought two undefeated scholarly champions to claim the supremacy of their traditions. The two men met cordially, and the contest arrangements were laid. Hundreds from the nearby villages and hamlets turned out for the appointed day. In his meditative preparation, our adventurer sensed that his propitious confrontation would require a certain caution. How curious, he mused. Uh-oh. The fun starts. As Shankara walked down the main road to the town square, amidst the multitude of eyes that stared at this new pretender, he spied the most unusual setting for the disputations. Within the prescribed circle, in the raised referee chair, for the first time ever in his travels, sat a female referee. Ooh. Her reputation had reached his ears earlier, but he never anticipated their paths would cross. Aha. The contest began at noon on Thursday. Note the date. 7 days later, the referee walked to the center of the debating circle and announced that the visiting challenger bested Mandana. Guess who won? The crowds cheered. Little did our new victor know, however, what was yet in store for him. He was about to encounter the most formidable and shrewd opponent in his entire career. After emerging victorious, and quite confident, and just about to walk away with the palm, a sweet voice amidst the noisy crowd interrupted his seeming triumph. "Excuse me, kind sir," Jones, "but you haven't answered all the questions, huh? Nor have you fully defeated your august opponent." Wait a minute, he thought. After all, the agreed rules are the rules. The crowd was shocked into silence. The surprising voice belonged to the referee, none other than Mandana's spouse. I need a drink for this. This is getting heady. Are you with me so far?
Mm-hmm.
you know? So? Quote, "Oh," she says, "I agree by all the rules that you have won over my husband," she firmly asserted. "But half a victory is hardly a conquest." What? "He and I are one. Our marriage proves that unity. Unless you choose to withdraw," she paused coyly, "then you must deal with the remaining half of your opponents." Now our apparent winner understood his earlier intuition. Politely acknowledging the protocols of the situation, as the crowd listened intently, he quietly uttered, "And what questions would the other august half propose to me?" Rising slowly from her chair, the woman glided into the center of the circle of the debate. "Well, first of all, sir," she uttered, eliciting the crowd's attention, "you have distinguished yourself for days with both your wit and your astute retorts. Moreover, you have raised such vexing questions of my husband that he could not provide satisfactory solutions. No doubt the villagers as well as the scholars will be repeating tales of your prowess for generations." The cheers rose once more. As he narrowed his eyes, Shankara was beginning to sense a setup. "Sir, among your repertoire of knowledge of astronomy, economics, history, mythology, physical sciences, mathematics, sociology, as well as competency in various arts and crafts, may I raise a simple inquiry?" she smilingly implored. Shankara swallowed hard. "Please, my lady, don't hesitate for the moment. Let us not delay the climax of this engagement. How may I serve your inquiry?" At that moment, Shankara noticed a peculiar, confident flash in his opponent's eyes as she spoke. Simultaneously, the crowd sensed a sudden change of energy pervading the atmosphere. "No doubt in your blissful contemplation of the universe," she began, "you have paid homage to the divine plan, which has brought forth such creative marvels. And in your comprehension of the workings of this vast world at its most intricate levels, as well as the massive movements of the stellar heavens, you have perceived and grasped the expressions of human passion in the business of human living. Have you, sir, along your spacious travels, ever pondered what it is that arouses the highest bliss for a woman in conjugal love? Tell us, if you would, from the wellsprings of your unfathomable wisdom, what secret portion of female nature, when appropriately kindled, brings forth such ecstatic rapture that even the devas envy her gender? If you can disclose that secret, O ascetic one, I will concede you the victor." Oh boy. Here's Shankara. Oh my God. Caught. Shall I go on? The trap closed. Shankara gulped again. The devas awaited. Now the masses turned their astonished heads to the celibate monk standing before them. Caught. What a thrust. How could he parry? For several moments he just gazed upon his unrivaled adversary with incredulity. The gauntlet was thrown down before him, and he sighed in admiration of her piercing audacity. My lady, he steadily uttered. According to the official rules of engagement, either opponent may, when at an impasse, request a 6-month interlude to compose the appropriate response. Oh, very well, she replied in a slightly condescending tone. If you wish, let's renew our engagement in 180 days. He's going to figure it all out in 180 days, huh? Well, you don't have to wait 180 days, I'll tell you. We went on right on. Here we go. Shankara grabbed his 2 seconds and rushed north for the mountains, where he found a dry and warm cave. He informed his assistants that it was crucial that they watch over and protect his body for the ensuing month. He explained that he would, after temporarily departing from his body without harm to his tissues, seek out a new residence for his spirit. How about that? Through exercising a special tantric practice, he slipped from his body, allowing sufficient prana to forestall decomposition. He searched from the astral plane for a suitable corpse that he could enter. How about that? And in his astral travels, he found a prince dying. So he entered his body and readjusted to the life of a householder. In this conjugal experience, our sadhu learned many intimate secrets that transformed his awareness of worldly life. Satisfied, he departed from his borrowed residence and took on his own once again, thus allowing the prince to have a final funeral. The 6 months were up. Excuse me. As the judge stood in the center of the circle, a familiar figure walked towards the square. The opponents bowed to each other and were welcomed back by the mayor of the region. It appeared that the crowd was even larger than before to witness the final bout. Here goes. Shankara began in a most unusual manner. In his reply, his voice exuded a gentleness heretofore never noticed in his debative demeanor. The crowd became more silent than usual. Equally, his eyes, even his moving gestures, conveyed an almost palpable reverence for his opponent. She could not help but notice his gracious comportment, nor was his expression of tone and stance lost upon the entranced audience. He continued to speak, but most astonishing of all was his formal and yet personal address towards her. He no longer referred to her as Mrs. Mishra. Mother, he bowed to her, along with my guru, you have done me the greatest of favors. You have provided me with an opportunity to enrich my life with an intimate knowledge that is normally forbidden to monks. With that, he articulated with such delicate phrases that it was obvious to everyone there that here was a man of marital experience. As he continued, the referee finally raised her hand to the crowd, signaling a pause. Now she glanced at her adversary and knew that he knew. Turning back to the transfixed crowd, she proclaimed, Jai Shankara, I bow to the winner. The debate was over. The devas glittered. Before the crowd dispersed, the victor leaped onto the dais, calling for their attention. And bringing his palms together and tilting his head toward her, he said, Mother, in the days past, you have not only courtly respected me in debate and hospitality, but you have honored all my fellow monks by your perspicacious knowledge. Fearlessly, you pressed me more than any opponent in my career. I salute you for challenging me to expand my wisdom to the intimacy of conjugal love and a discernment of womanhood. They are treasures I will never forget. And raising his outstretched arms, he loudly announced, I decree that from this day forth, O great lady, our monks will give you first place in the tradition. Our order of monks will hereafter bear your blessed memory forever. And so it was. In 1969, the first monk of the Bharati order came to Europe and the United States and stayed for 2 decades, leaving behind a wake of shattered worldview paradigms and conveying a renewable vision of immortal destiny inherited from Shankara and the sages of the Himalayas. Shankara came back a second time. Ramana Maharshi.